We're back on the S12. My name's Keegan. Welcome to back to the channel. We got a bunch of small stuff to get to on this. We need to cut off the LE5 tensioner bracket stuff. So these little knobs right here are going to get knocked down. This usually holds the hook up on the front end right here. So we're going to lock those off. So this tensioner bracket on the LSJs will bolt right up. That way we can hopefully get a belt onto this. It's just going to be crank, a riding pulley, tensioner, AC, and then supercharger. So power steering is also going to need to get addressed. I have the lines, and this is a Volvo pump, and we're going to be wiring that up, hopefully along with the rest of the harness. And alternator is going to get installed. Forgot that, but that's going to be on there as well. It's going to sit probably right here. And then we're going to try to get some parts made from Senkatsen. Shout out to the boys. I'm going to need this lower piece remade. We're going to have it remade in probably like an aluminum. And then that way I can also have these mounts on this 2003. I believe this is a water-to-air supercharger cooler for a 2003 Mustang. And that's what we got right now. Holes notched down. I went ahead and ground it down a little bit to clean it up and then filed some of the edges so it's not too sharp at all. But the tensioner is now mounted. Alternator is just sitting here, but the clearance and everything is good. You do need, if you have the factory LE5 bolts, you need the same bolts extended about 1 1/8 to sit and accommodate for the spacing for the tensioner bracket. And then I was able to just reuse one of these bolts right down here to hold this middle rider pulley. S12 AC stuff out. The lines are gone. It was weird because they were out, down, and then they came back around. It was just one big mess going back around, but it's out. And the goal is, I think we're going to try to keep this farther out. So we need that line to be flat as possible for the radiator to sit. But this core support front piece is going to get cut right here, notched forward, so we can have this sitting farther forward. And then we're going to use the back sides of these nuts to make mounts for the hole here, right there. I drilled it out. They had tabs on it, but they're just too big to fit in the slot. And then that way we can slide this forward and still have room in the summer to install an AC kit, and we'll go over making lines for all that. This car originally being an automatic, there's a block off plate here. So we're going to need to address these bolts. Those look like 12s. And then we're going to need to also remove the gas pedal because we have a drive-by-wire system going on. And that means that this clutch pedal is going to be able to slide right on in. And then we do have a cool piece from good old China that adapts this Nissan bolt pattern going on. So the wide 2, it will adapt to the pedal and allow this Willwood unit to sit right on in there. The only thing that's going to be a little tricky is adjusting the rod. We might have to totally swap it out, but for terms of mock-up, we're going to start getting everything going. Some mild convincing with the flathead against the firewall after we disconnected the ball from the pedal itself. This is our spaceship now, so we can actually see what we're doing. 210s, this one and that one. Pedal comes right off, and you just have to remove this sensor, which I'm guessing is like a full throttle sensor because it's only engaged when the pedal's all the way. And then for the ball, you just gotta pop it out and then go up, and it'll take that wire through there. The drive-by-wire pedal we got out of the Solstice. This housing is plastic, so we're going to have to make a copy of these 2 mounting holes and then have a bracket come out that'll support these 2 holes here. That's just easier than cutting up this pedal. As much as I'd like to, either I or someone else will need it in the future. This piece just kind of gets pushed out. On the other side, just use the flathead, push the bracket itself, and it came out. And then the pedal itself fits right in those holes. And then there's also the mounting hole right here, right straight above for everything to just bolt right in. So we're gonna just push it right on in. The order from Senkatsen showed up. So this is the pedal piece. We just gotta add a little bend in it. This is the first bolt pattern for the hole in the firewall. So these 2 holes. Then we went ahead and had the open section and 2 holes for the LE5 drive-by-wire pedal. And then I also went ahead and had the bumper section that's made out of plastic to hold the inner balance area done. And we just got to add one little bend section in from that side down to this, and that'll also be good to go. Another day on the S12, we've got good news. Pedals. Gas. I did get that bracket mounted up, put some hardware in to hold down the pedal. I did put a notch in it, pull it out, that way I had full swing. This brake pedal still needs to get cut, and the clutch pedal doesn't work, but we do have all 3 pedals. Them working isn't, you know, being considered right now. So that's exciting. We'll be doing the coolant lines for everything. So I did go ahead, I got 2 mounts made up for the left and right sides of the water to air cooler. This is off a 2003 supercharged Mustang. On there, it's you know, not moving. I know a lot of people are gonna like the hard mount aspect of it, but I honestly cut these way too short on the original mock-up, and I didn't expect to have to cut out that middle tab section. Here it is. But it's gone, and I'm really happy with the clearance on everything. I did have cardboard for the mock-up down here, so I'm not too worried about her going anywhere at all. With the intercooler mocked up and plenty of room for AC goodies, the AC stuff, condenser will sit right on in here, and we have these brackets that were factory, or we can build off of the ones we put in. But either way, that's good to go, and we are good to move on to the coolant system. So the coolant system on this car, the goal is to keep everything serviceable. Shout out to ZZP. They make everything for Ecotechs for some reason. They're killing it. If you get this pump, make sure you get the pigtail. I don't remember if I bought them both at the same time, but just remember. We went ahead and got some 5/8 fuel line and an AN fitting and a bunch of barbs to build off of. Why not do AN coolant lines for everything? Because it's a cool race car. The goal is to be serviceable. If I need anything anywhere, I want to be able to service it with just some hose and clamps. That's also why I went ahead and got a metal Y fitting for the dual outlets on the back of the ZZP cooler. And we're going to try to mount this pump down over here. And we're just going to try to keep it all going smooth and clean. I do also need to leave 2 kind of open Ys because I need to get a pressure reservoir for the supercharged coolant system, and also the coolant system for the rest of the motor. I do have pipe. We're going to also make that. So these will both be on this side because that's a S13 radiator that's going to be going in this. And that's really about everything. I made a little graphic, but the camera doesn't like focusing. Basically, CZP dual outlets go into the pump. Pump's going to go into the lower cold side of the supercharger. Top side's going to go out into the inlet, and the world will go around. Let's get started. And I did end up needing to know exactly where the line needed to land for when we mount the pump. So I did go ahead and officially mount the power steering pump. I took the original bracket, cleaned it up, got the rust off, sprayed it, and then ended up welding 2 points to the chassis. And then also used one of the rods for the water to air intercooler and used the section right there. And then also went ahead and made a bracket for the oil filter relocation. It is still below the output point, so I'm not too worried about it being too high for a bunch of dry starts. Happiest with this kind of section right here, but it kind of had to happen just for how big the lines are and to keep everything from kinking. But we got the outlets right here, so this is going to go right into there, that's going to go right into there. And I did end up switching where I was going to put the pump, so it's originally going to be right here. Then I figured that was way too high. They're originally on the very bottom of the block on the LSJ motors, so I'm pretty sure by the fuel rail will work just fine. We have the lowest line right here coming out of the pump right there, and I'll rotate that a little bit once it's mounted. We're also going to be using a Bosch 044 fuel pump mount bracket because it's the same size, 60 millimeters. And I did end up not making a third little hardline section just because the the Y we have that's going to be right there is super close, so it'll close the gap just fine. And there's also going to have to be a little T-point right here to act as a bleeder, so we'll have the supercharger coolant system right there. Just a quick little tidbit, ended up using insulated cable clamps, 5/8 to hold the 5/8 line. So you do one on one side, one on the other side, you have them facing inwards. And I just used a single bolt going through here, single bolt going through there, and if you need them tighter, you just kind of rotate them against each other or into each other. Prepping the engine bay for wiring, we needed to get rid of the speedo cable, pulled it through. The way you remove this cluster, remove these two very scary to remove old plastic pieces with a flathead. So they're right there. And then you pop up the back, proceed to break all three of those clips, pull it out, unplug the left side, the right side, depending on how you're looking at it. Pop this piece off, do the two screws up there, two down here, then do the one screw right there, and then the speedo cable will be out. Onto the wiring, we've done the injectors, done the coils, did both lobes for the exhaust intake cams, ended up needing a MAF section, forgot about it, using a factory Ecotech boot, and then putting in the hard section that mounts the MAF sensor itself, cut it off of the Ecotech kind of hard box, and it also has this big resonator. This kind of reduces air and kind of keeps air available for the system at higher RPMs. We got some relays, wiring goodies, got the bracket for the water pump, and we got our little coolant reservoirs. Just got these off Amazon. Universal, we're going to block these two off. We'll leave the tops open. But when it comes to mounting, they are aluminum, so we're going to rely off the bracket that's built into them and use the metal nuts on them. So this, I did the first one as kind of an example of what's going to happen. I mounted up the studs on the bracket, the aluminum bracket itself, and then marked where it landed on the side of the wheel well, and then bored it out with the drill. So got it up flush to it, and then now we're just going to have to full send that weld around those two studs. And then here's kind of where I marked it up for the second one, little face going on. And we're gonna go ahead and copy that. Another day in paradise. We ended up routing the fuel pump wire, and we ended up using the gray wire off of the ECU harness we have, and I tied it into the black and red wire at the back of the fuse panel. So I tested it for continuity, and it's right here. So I pulled the fuse out, that way I know it's not being used here. Took this fuse box out, spliced it in, and this way we keep the OEM through the rocker without having to pull the whole interior out, having to rewire anything or have it stand out. I was going to go under the car if we didn't find it, but we ended up figuring it out. And the reason it took a little bit is because Nissan has it as a white and purple wire down at the pump itself, so you can see the wire right there, hopefully. But there's a little connector plug here. There's another shot at that white and purple wire. And then on the other side of it goes to the black and red. Come on, come on. There we go. But that goes to the black and red on the other side. Runs all the way up to the car. So we just gotta wire everything up at the terminals, do the starter wire, and we should be good. Update on the wiring. Shout out to PowerTune Digital. Those guys are out in Australia. I called them at 1 a.m. Eastern, and they answered. It was about 4, but it only rang twice. Shout out to them. They answered my questions. Really, what I need to know was if I could tie in the engine harness I got. It came with a CAN bus negative and positive, and the way this dash works is it reads off your OBD2 signals. So there's a CAN low, which is the blue, and a CAN high, which is the positive. And they were able to tell me that it's not recommended to tie that into the other wires. It's best to use the OBD port because this dash should only be on through one thing. So if I was to hook up like HP tuners into the ECU, that is no bueno to also have the dash on, which is fine because while you're tuning with HP tuners, you're already going to have all the information you need. So I'm not too worried about it. But shout out to those guys holding it down. And I did button up some of the miscellaneous wires. I did save some extra length and then heat shrinked them. So these were gauge accessory wires, but I'm not going to be using those. PowerTune Digital. And I went ahead and bundled up all of the straight to battery wires in this loom, and I had 2 fan wires. These are the positive to battery, these are the fan wires, but these are going to get ran across under the dash, and we're going to go out the passenger side along with the wire for the fuse block I got over there, just because it's like a more direct straight to the battery route. Loomed up the fan wires, the power wires, all in one bundle, and we're going to run it through the only hole I had to put in the firewall. I'm a little sad about it, but it's going to go right under here. Boop. Everything's going to go under there, but before that, I want to run the power wire for the fuse block, because it's going to be going through the same loom, so when I wrap everything up, I want it to all be in the same bundle. So we went ahead, took this, used it as a little template, copied it onto here, made a little bracket, not from Sen, had to prove we still had it. Gonna spray this black, mount it up, and then we'll start officially running wires, like the signal wire up to the 12 volt into the S12 ignition switch. The ignition wiring, this kind of applies to anything, or for any harnesses that you have, just to confirm which wires are doing what in the system. Thankfully, we only have 2 ignition wires we have to worry about, and we have the keys so we can test continuity. By that I mean you put your multimeter on this setting right here, and you're going to use both these prongs. You put them each individually on each one of these, and you'll just kind of look for which ones change and or have a reading between the multimeter. It'll usually beep depending on what multimeter you have. This one's pretty cheap and it beeps, but you put your key in off, and we are able to verify that the blue wire is accessory. The black with white stripe is our power on. Our white with red stripe is always on power, and our green, or our black with green stripe, is the starter solenoid. So thankfully we were able to test everything. Unfortunately, this S12, even though I have the manual, a lot of these wires are inconsistent, and I don't know if it's a jump between just odd years of being like a Z31 with the VG motor going to like the S13 platform, but either way, we got it figured out. So we're going to be able to run these final 2 wires, hopefully cleanly, and then we'll officially sleeve everything under the dash, waiting for that piece to dry, and we'll mount that underneath. Starting to address the starter wiring, I went down and it occurred to me we don't have a fill neck, so I found it, and it's right there all the way down. I hope you can see that. It's right there. So we're going to put this in and bend it to hopefully come out like right here. Located, put in after some bending, bracket trimming. She's good to go. Gonna just put that on in there. Hopefully the measurements don't change too much because it got bent a little bit. I am going to brace it to probably the supercharger bolt right there, so I'll make a little bracket once I pull this back off. But for the sake of having one right now, and that's obviously why I put that window there. I knew this was going to be a thing, you know. Black and yellow striped wire straight to the starter. This yellow wire here. We did end up getting fuel pressure, and I was able to get the motor to fire off with some brake cleaner. Problem is I don't have a belt, so I believe it's choking out the air to keep it running for any long period of time. Throttle pedal's working with everything. Now that the motor runs, we're waiting on a belt for us to load up a tune, get the motor hot. We're going to need to run some coolant piping, and before we do that, we need to put the radiator in. So we already have a radiator, but I did go ahead and have the boys over at Sen cut one of these radiator shrouds up. Technically, this should work with any S13 that's also going to be using these 700 CFM Champion fans. These are off of the old build for the Z. The LS just was too hot for it, but we're going to fit everything together, see how it all fits into start dash end right there. But we also need to know where we're going, so we need to hard mount the radiator, and it did seem to have a little bit of issues with the lines I'd done for the water to air intercooler for the supercharger, but we will be able to use the towers, kind of the support arms for the front arms. And this radiator has I got a rubber bushing, you can see right here, and it's kind of like a support rod going right here, and both of them land under this face. So what we're going to do is just drill a hole, drop the radiator about an inch farther down, and then start aiming our piping from the back thermostat up to the front. It'll be tricky right here by the exhaust, but we'll figure it out. Got our first section of the coolant system for the back end marked up. I still need to full send it, but what I did was I ended up putting marks on one piece and the other piece because I'm limited on hands, and I've been sliding my hand behind the motor right here. So I would orient kind of where I need to be, wipe off the mark, and then line them up so they'd both be exactly where I needed to be for tacking. But we can kind of see what's going on here. Trying to minimize harsh bends in the system, so there's only going to be the 180 right there. It's going to swing down. We're going to put a 45 right here. I wanted to do soft, you know, actual coolant hose right here, but there's really kind of no reason, and I feel better having it hard pipe near the exhaust. So we'll cut up a 90 down to a 45 right there, come back out probably right about here, and then find a piece for the hose right there. Of the hardline ran, it's about an inch out from the exhaust. I just got the lower section tacked right now, but exhaust right there, and I'll probably weld a little heat shield plate right here, but it comes out right about there, which is perfect for aiming it right through the intercooler piping right there to the outlet right there. So we're gonna run this, and I'm gonna full send that weld, that weld, that weld, that weld, weld a little barb on it so that way the hose grabs just fine. And I'm not sure if I'm gonna paint it or not, but that will be the hardest pipe done. The top section will be super easy, just a 180, 90, very clean. It's getting dark, just progress. Clutch line from the transmission hooked into the dash 4 adapter fitting into the wheelwood. We did do an adapter into a different fitting that went to dash 4 to 90. Don't think that'll affect flow too much, just because it's already not a boosted unit, so it should be fine. Gonna have to install the little generic fork kit. This is for GM vehicles, I believe, but that way we can start to bleed the clutch. And I did end up using the Fragola adapter to get out of the wheelwood unit, and then an R.O.S piece to go to the dash 4. So those are the part numbers if you need them. In order for our car to go into gear, we're gonna have to figure out the clutch situation. I ended up sourcing a clevis from Napa because AutoZone and O'Reilly's don't really know what these are. Dash won't let you yoink one. Ended up being a super fine thread. I believe it was 5/16. Got a coupler nut, cut the distance from where the clevis ended and the booster thread stopped. Did it about half an inch short, so that way we can have our coupler nut in there for adjustment, and we'll have this nut of the same thread type so we can lock it in. That's 12 runs. Shout out to Brian, helped me get a tune set up with the 80-pound injectors. I did go ahead and install a wideband because if anybody is tuning this, they're going to need to reference the wideband. Yes, there is a lambda on the PowerTune digital dash, but you kind of can't, you're not supposed to run that along with the HP tuners. It'll kind of fry a lot of the circuitry going on. But we've gotten the hard lines for the coolant routed. There's this one running around there. I need to button it up to where it's not just going to be a couple centimeters away from the exhaust. But she's installed, and now the issue is the coolant lines for the supercharger. So this is water to air. Got the water cooler up here, and it's pretty crunched up right here between the oil relocation lines. Power steering's not even done yet. We'll knock out a video on that tomorrow just because it's its own little separate thing. But I want to have the car idling before I put it back on the ground to test everything. And we were going to run a generic Y from O'Reilly's and a brass barb. That way we can bleed the system before it gets to under pressure for the pump. But this is way too long to work for us, so we're going to end up making our own little metal piece, 5/8, and then I got some elbows, so 2 of these will go on the front, and then 2 of these will go over here, and we'll get it kind of made up. And I'm going to end up cutting a little barb off of a fuel filter as a bleeder so I can weld it into this little piece, and we'll be good to go. Our little piece is made. This one will be going from there to the bottom of the water pump. And we consolidated the other mess into this. Rat's nest of hosing going into the pump. 100% I would have modified that plate if I knew that I was going to need everything this close. If it's still an issue, then I will just take everything off, move this probably down right
there to the bottommost part of the system, and that way it's easy to get to. And I'll modify that plate to have like an in and out right here. But for now, this should work. I'm confident with all the hosing and everything. Everything's good and tied up, but I'm gonna put some hoses for the breather on this tank right here. And then we're gonna hook up this one and that one to this for the radiator. Get these filled up, and then we're gonna top off the supercharger. I was told this was rebuilt. The snout is pretty tight, but there's definitely not a lot of fluid in it. This is the official part number, 104041. You're not supposed to do it super full because you'll blow out the seals, but we're gonna do it just to the bottom of the fill point, so all of this will have room to breathe. Apparently these knock. It's just like an Eden supercharger thing. It does sound like a can of marbles. It's concerning, but if cars 3,500 miles have it, then I'm not too worried about it. Well, line's buttoned up. I did do the power steering. I'll probably throw that in a separate video just because of how easy it was and just kind of how specific and niche it is. But I'm not too happy with how all of the coolant hosing and plumbing is with the water pump, the lines going through, and then the water cooler. The water cooler I'm fine with how it's mounted, and I'm fine with the crossover pieces. None of those are leaking, but I'm just not a fan of the chaos that's in there, because if anything was to happen to those, I just wouldn't be able to deal with it on the fly very easily. So I might just throw some factory injectors on it, throw the factory intake on it, and just run it like that for a little bit till we get bored. But that way it's good, reliable, easy. And I'll go ahead and start it for everybody. Just, you know, we made it. It's here, alive. Beep boop.